Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on strategic pricing in practice. My name is Tim Robeers. I'm the Senior Insights and Marcom consultant here at Bubuk, and I will be your moderator for this webinar. And today we're joined by a very international audience. If I look at the registration list, we've got people from all across the world in both B2B and B2C industries. And some of you I've seen have joined our previous webinars, for example, on navigating resilient pricing strategies. So welcome to all of you. We're very much building on the previous webinars on looking at how different practical frameworks, tools, and proven methods can be converted to help putting pricing theory into practice. And for that, I'm joined by two fantastic experts, Nicole Hage, who will guide us through these strategic pricing fundamentals, and Professor Philippe Baecke, who will share insights from market research and data-driven pricing. Welcome to you both. I'll let you both introduce yourself more to our audience. Perhaps, Nicole, you can start off.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everyone. So I'm Nicole. I started Bubuk more than 20 years ago. I'm the CEO, and over the years, I got more and more interested and passionate about what customers and consumers think, behave, what they buy, not buy, why they don't do that. So, of course, pricing is at the core of it, hence my strong interest in strategic price setting and also promotions.
Thank
and
you,
my
Philippe.
name is Philippe Baecke. I'm a professor at Vlerick Business School, specialized in business analytics and artificial intelligence. And for example, in pricing, also data analytics can be a significant component. So that's also something we do. We teach these topics to master, but definitely also executive students. And sometimes I also support businesses on innovative projects in business analytics, AI, and for example, also pricing.
Okay, thank you both for that introduction. Perhaps before we dive in, just a quick note on today's webinar setup. We'll be having the discussion with our speakers for about 35 minutes or so. Feel free to, during the session, put your questions or any questions you might have into the chat. We'll address as many of those as we can during the live Q&A after, for which we've allocated about 10 to 15 minutes. So following the conclusion of the webinar, we'd also like to invite you all to fill out the satisfaction survey so we can get feedback to further steer our webinars in the future. So thanks for that. Then I would say we just jump right in. Perhaps, Nicole, why pricing?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Tim. Yes, today we are indeed talking about pricing, as we know, and why pricing, or why is pricing so important? Because it has such a strong and direct link on profitability, which could be, of course, also volume and revenue, but also very impactful on your brand positioning. You know, how is your brand seen? So it's much more than just that price ticket that people see in the store or online. Yet still, it's often seen as an afterthought, you know, very often it's part of finance, although it is a financial element, it's so much more than finance. People look at it, you know, if the bottom line is fine, and probably pricing is fine. If the bottom line is not fine, then, ooh, there's panic in an organization, ooh, then possibly need to, you know, change their price up or down, but that's really not the way we should be looking at pricing. You know, it should be thought about more professionally than that. So, and that's what we really want to change today. Philip, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I agree. There's an interesting quote of Warren Buffett, who says, who once referred to pricing power as one of the most important criteria to evaluate businesses. So it should be considered strategically, I believe. Nevertheless, if I also look at managers, still they make decisions on pricing a lot based on gut feeling or very simple, sometimes questionable assumptions. And that's also the reason why, for example, at Vlerick Business School, we have a program dedicated to pricing. It's not only myself who's teaching over there. I do that in collaboration with two other faculty, where we try to guide managers developing a pricing strategy and also implementing pricing tactics. So we try to educate them over there a little bit.
Well, thanks to the both of you. I think that sort of sets the stage perfectly. Clearly, building a pricing strategy deserves careful considerations given the complexities that are involved. And one of today's goals is, of course, to give you, our audience, an idea of the different frameworks and tools that are available to help you put or make a success of this within your own context. So perhaps, Nicole, you can start us off with this.
Yes, and it will be a challenge to cover that in the next 30 or 35 minutes. We probably can cover a few webinars, but we're not going to do that today. So first of all, let's start with something that some or many of you might be familiar with, and that's the 3 C's of pricing strategy. That's very often where it all starts, and you'll see in front of you on the slide the 3 C's. The first one, the C of cost. Of course, you want to make sure that when you put the price on that price ticket, that it covers all your costs. You want to look at your competitors as well. So even if you're a price leader, like an Apple or a Netflix or a Salesforce, you still have those competitors that you want to keep an eye on. And the third one is your customer. You know, you might have a good price, but even you might be able to charge more because the customer values your product so much, or maybe you're overpricing. So, you know, all these three are really important. And what we see from 20 years of experience, that our clients that have those 3 C's in control are much smarter, more resilient, and they can also act much quicker when something needs to happen, you know, especially with, you know, the turmoil world that we currently live in. But there is actually a 4th C. I'm not sure if any one of you can think of the 4th C. Maybe you can, or there's another C that we have in mind. So feel free to put them in the chat. But the 4th C that we would want to talk about is the company goal. So of course, your price will be a reflection of what you want to be as a brand or as a business. You know, what do you want to be seen as very premium or prestige, or are you more looking at a growing value and a value for money, or growing volume and a value for money brand? That will have an impact on your pricing. So, you know, the 4th C is equally important. And very often I would say that the C of customer and the C of company goal needs to be in line, because, you know, you might want to have, I said the company goal, or the C of the company goal, is your desired positioning, what you aim for, and the C of the customer is your perceived position. And very often they're not in balance. You know, they should be in balance. And that's in a way what we're going to talk about today. I see you nodding quite a bit, Philippe.
Yeah, I like your suggestion. In my classes, I also teach the 3 C's, but the 4th C of company goal, it's actually also an interesting one. It links to how you use pricing in order to position your brand in the market. Mm-hmm. A remark I have also over here, and that's also something I try to share, is that on which kind of C do you focus the most? Typically, I say at least pricing is not like so easy to do research on. Make sure you look at that from multiple perspectives. So typically, I recommend to do all of them, but the weight you give on each of these C's that differs. Measuring how much your customer is willing to pay, it's quite difficult to do, to be honest. You see that? And it depends on how accurately you're able to capture that, how much weight you will put on this one. Honestly, if you ask me which C is most interesting, is the C of the customer, the willingness to pay. But it's the most difficult one to measure. Hence, you know, if I'm able to measure this well, I'm going to fully focus, not fully, but mostly focus on the C of customer. Otherwise, I might rely a little bit more on cost-related or competitive-related pricing elements.
I would agree on that. In an ideal scenario, all brands indeed look at that C as well, but you have to be ready for that. You will want and also want to invest in it. But that kind of brings us to the pricing methods that are most often used in organizations, and linked to those. Let's say we go back to the initial 3 C's. So the cost plus based pricing, competitive based, and value based pricing. I would think that in the audience, almost everyone, even if they don't realize, will be using that cost plus, because typically these numbers are in the organization, although not everyone has a good view on their P&L, surprisingly. It does happen. But, you know, that's really the starting point. And then, of course, you need to look at your competitors, and then the value-based pricing, as you mentioned, it's kind of the core one as well to look at, but is also more complex. But to do all of those, you need to capture data. And that's, of course, where you come in, Philip, because you're the data guy.
Yes, indeed. But I also need to be honest, like cost plus, it's mostly based on internal data. You know, basically you need to sit together with your accountant. For example, in our program, I have 2 other faculties. One of them is a faculty specialized in accountancy, and that's in order to support your cost plus pricing, allocating fixed variable costs to the cost of the production of your product in order to create a margin over there. You see that? For competitive-based pricing, you need to look for secondary data. Start crawling the web, doing mystery shopping in order to get at least kind of an idea, in order to get some price points of your competitors. The most challenging one, in my opinion, but also most valuable, is value-based pricing. Trying to get like an understanding how much your customer is willing to pay. And for that, there exists like a whole range of methods, but it's not always so easy to collect that information.
And what will these methods bring you, or bring us, or bring the customer?
I believe like you have like a whole range of methods, but if you want to start, try to start with the Holy Grail. And for me, the Holy Grail is designing a price demand curve. Over here, you can see on the slides a price demand curve. And basically, that's a curve that represents, if I have a price point, what percentage of my potential customers will purchase my product. And typically, if you lower the price, more people will purchase your product. If you increase the price, less people will purchase the product. So almost the price demand curve of almost every brand or every product, it declines. But what's more interesting is the steepness. How much does it decline? If it is very steep, that means with small variations in price, you see already big variations in demand. So that means you're in a very price sensitive business. If it's more flat, you're in a less price sensitive business. And this can help already to set some strategies, promotion strategies, for example. Typically, you will put more price sensitive products into promotion versus others. But also starting from this price demand curve, you can then deviate a price profit curve. You take price, you subtract the variable cost, and then you multiply that by the demand or sales. And based on that, you have a price profit curve, which typically has like a little bit an inverse U-shape curve. And it's that one that allows you to set like the ideal price point within your organization.
And how to get to that demand curve? Because I think the audience is probably thinking, okay, I want that demand curve for my brand.
You need to have that Holy Grail. And for that, there exists like multiple methodologies. And I think on this slide over here, we have listed a little bit an overview that can range from methodologies that are basing on the data you have in-house, historical observable purchase behavior data. You see that a little bit on the top, up until data that you collect through declared surveyed data. And there exists like a whole range of methods, ranging from very simple but also less accurate methods. Just directly asking, hey, Nicole, how much are you willing to pay for my product, right? Yeah, that's direct questioning. It gives you already some kind of an idea, but sometimes the declared price of you is not exactly what you also will act upon. Do you know? Whereas if we really look at behavioral data, for example, historical sales data, that's really what customers do. So it increases a little bit more the accuracy of my price demand curve. And that links a little bit with what I mentioned earlier, that value-based pricing of your customers. Yeah, honestly, if I just use direct questioning, I still will focus a lot on cost plus and competitive-based pricing. If I can make use of historical sales data or, for example, a conjoint analysis, and we will discuss that later what that is, then I will rely way more on the value-based pricing method.
Yeah. I very much like that overview because it clearly shows kind of the different ways of doing pricing. I hope the audience will like that as well. And I fully agree that if you can make use of historical data, it's kind of true behavior. So there's nothing to be argued. But there's not always that data, hence kind of the variety of methods. But I mean, we won't have time to look at all 7 of those, unfortunately. But I would say that the 4 most used methods is historical sales data from Westendorp, Gable, Granger, and conjoint. But let's start with the historical sales data because I know, Philip, that's something that it's close to your heart.
Yeah, that's close to my expertise. You know, I used to be a data scientist, so working on databases and company data, that's indeed close to my heart. And doing that in the context of pricing is also interesting, but also challenging. I need to be honest in that. Why is that? Well, first of all, you need to collect the data from organizations, and that is not always, let's be honest, stored in a good way. You need to do a lot of data cleaning. You do not always have like information about historical price points, for example, or even historical sales. So the data cleaning is already a challenge. But in addition to that, actually, what is a huge challenge in many organizations is the lack of variation in price. In order to create this price demand curve, okay, I need to have variation of different price points in order to see, okay, what was the demand at that moment? And if you ask to plenty of organizations, yeah, did you vary the price in the past? Well, basically they say, well, we have every year the same price point, and maybe like on a yearly basis, we adjust that a little bit with inflation. Yeah, okay. Then it will be damn hard to do this analysis based on historical data, to be honest. Sometimes you have situations where you have price variations, and that is in the case of discounts. For example, a case we have done was with a company specialized in selling cars. And over there, let's be honest, you never purchase a car at a list price. You hope to always get at least some kind of discount. But that discount, it can vary. You see that? So what we started to do was we zoomed into a specific kind of moment in the purchase funnel, and that's a moment where you ask for a code, and then some people they convert, demand, they purchase, right, and others they don't. See that? What we did was we started to collect all these codes, collecting information about conversion or not on a code level. Besides that, we also had a look at the discount provided, and luckily that discount percentage varied up until a very, very small discount of only 5%, up until even 30% of discount. That is the most important parameter we want to link, but besides that, we also collected other information. Car-specific information. Are we talking about a very basic car or more a premium car, for example? Customer-specific information. Is this a private customer or more a B2B customer leasing the car, for example? And context-specific characteristics. You know, is this done during the car fair or outside of the car fair period? And once we had all this data available, we started to build regression-based models that link the relationship between all these characteristics, including the price and the discount percentage, you know, on conversion. Yeah? Once we have all these relationships mapped, you can zoom into the relationship between discount and conversion, and hence create in our case, not a price demand curve, but a discount demand curve that indicated for each discount percentage how much people can we expect that will convert. See that? Based on that, you can do tons of interesting analysis. You can create these curves, not like for the full population, but you can fine-tune these curves, for example, depending on the customer, depending on the context, depending on the price, the type of car, and as a result of that, really give price suggestions for each of these niches. You see that? That's a very advanced case, in my opinion. It's very valuable for the organization also, but I want to stress this one more time. You need to have the data available, and you need to have that variation in historical price, or in this case, discount, available before you can even implement this.
Yeah, it's interesting and fascinating to hear the context also of the case study of the car vendor project that you gave for these historical data points. Now, you already touched upon it, but of course, historical data is one thing, but to what extent is it capable of actually capturing the full image all the time? Perhaps, Nicole, that's something you would want to jump into.
Well, yeah, and I very much like historical data as well, because it's captured behavior. No, there's no question about it, but that data is not always there, or is not sufficient reliability or variability, I should say. Hence, we need to rely on talking to customers, and we know that, and the way we talk to customers, will help to make it more reliable. So Philippe, you said if it's direct questioning, then we know if we ask someone, what do you want to pay, that they might not give you the full truth, not because they want to lie, but because as soon as you talk about pricing, I always refer to that red light bulb, that they think, ooh, pricing, I have to be careful. But there are smart ways of talking to customers so that light bulb kind of fades away. Hence also kind of what you saw on the slide that Philippe showed, from the kind of the less accurate to the more accurate, is because it's different ways of talking about pricing to customers. Now, so talking to customers means asking questions. There are different ways of doing that, different methods. We'll start with methods where we have the luxury, I would say, to talking to many customers or prospect customers, let's say to 100 or more. We call that quantitative methods. And there are three well-known ones. There is the Van Westendorp, the Gable Granger, and the conjoint. We'll go into more detail in the conjoint because that's the most powerful one. But briefly speaking, Van Westendorp is used for products that are very new, where there is no reference or product that they can compare to. And Gable Granger is more for a variant or for familiar products, I would say. We can always, for those who are more interested, put it in the chat and we can talk about it later. But what we can do is really focus on conjoint, because to me, that's basically the holy grail. We already use the word holy grail, so I need to use another term, kind of the Rolls Royce of pricing, because it can do so much more than building that demand curve. So of course, demand curve is the first thing we want to know, but there is more to that. Let me explain conjoint through an example, and I'll let you think of a brand or a provider of smart light bulbs. I think smart light bulbs probably came into the market maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and then there were only a few brands in the market. They could really price themselves very premium because they're quite, I would say, unique. But that's not the situation anymore. There are many brands in the market now, also cheaper brands also offering good quality. So of course our client wanted to understand, is our price not too high, or are we not overpriced, or do we still have that kind of edge? Do we still have a strong brand equity, or do we need to offer extra benefits to our products so we can keep to that current price point that we have? So what a conjoint does, and you'll see it on the screen in front of you, we show a lineup of products. So we don't show one product, we show 3, 4, or even more products which differ in price, as also product characteristics, and of course also brand. And what we want to understand by showing that lineup, we ask the customer, given that lineup, what product would you most likely buy? We don't ask that question once, we ask that 10 to 12 times, each time with a different lineup, with different characteristics, different brands, different prices. And through this, we can see, how do people choose? Do they look at brand? Do they look at price? Do they look at promotion? Do they look at characteristics? Or it's a combination? And that will tell us what drives brand choice, what are the needs, how strong is a brand, what price will trigger purchase, or will kind of trigger moving to a competitor, for instance. So it gives us lots of information, hence the power of a conjoint. And I'll explain that a bit more by showing what you can get out of a conjoint, because of course that's the most interesting, right? The insights. And I'll start with one of the key insights or deliverables, and it's a tool, a simulator tool. We call that the Ref Impact tool. And what it allows you to really play with all the kind of the moving boxes that you used in the conjoint. You move price up and down, you introduce promotion or you take it away, you change the lineup, fewer competitors, more competitors, also the product characteristics. And then you see immediately what impact does it have on volume, on demand, hence the demand curve that you can create, on revenue. And if you include the P&L elements into the tool, you can also look at profit. So you can already see kind of, so many scenarios that you can look at. Now, apart from that, it creates some other, I would say, very useful insights to build your pricing strategy, because again, it's not only that price ticket. You also want to know how your brand is perceived, how strong your brand power is. And what you see on the next visual on the left-hand side is the price elasticity for different brands or different products. When Philip explained the demand curve, he talks about, the shape, how flat or steep it is, and that steepness is expressed by the elasticity coefficient. So the bigger the number, the more negative, the steeper that curve will be. And the more you have to be careful with changing your price. The smaller that number, let's say it's well below -1, it means you're not price elastic and you can stretch your price. So that elasticity will give you a good insight to your brand power. And that brings me to the insight in the middle, where I've shown the relationship between price and price elasticity. And what we've seen from 20 years of research, that's typically a negative relationship. So the higher the price of your product, the more premium, the less price elastic you will be. However, it's very important to double check that, which you can do with conjoint, because in this example, I think the kind of the bigger bubble brand Z has a pretty high price, but it's well above that relationship line, which means it's overpriced. So through conjoint, you can compare your position versus your competitors to understand, are you well priced, are you underpriced or overpriced, which these days is a big question that many companies have, because price, especially through inflation the last few years and the energy crisis, have gone up quite a lot. But is your brand value actually following that? And especially luxury products, you might have heard, like a Chanel handbag, for instance, they're really struggling because they have increased their prices a lot, but the value that customers are perceiving is not following. And that's basically the issue they have. And then the last chart you can look at, if you improve your product offering by adding in extra characteristics, making it higher quality, how much more can you charge? In this example, you could charge €4 more. So you can see it does much more than that demand curve. Not sure, Philip, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I like the conjoint analysis as a technique a lot. It comes a little bit with a disadvantage. It's way more intensive. You need to invest as an organization in doing a conjoint analysis in comparison to the other techniques you mentioned. You need to ask way more questions to a customer rating different bundles, but it also has its benefits. First of all, you deviate the price demand curve indirectly. You don't explicitly ask, hey, what do you think about the price? You basically say, hey, choose a product which has, by the way, a price and other product characteristics. In addition, once you have invested in this technique, you can get so much out of this. Not only like price demand curves, but you can, for example, even segment your customers based on all the insights from conjoint analysis, where you can see maybe more price-sensitive segments, but also brand-sensitive segments, for example. You have an idea about the size of these segments. You can quantify the value of your brand. How much more are people willing to pay for a brand Philips compared to a private label, for example? So it's a very valuable method, but it's an investment for an organization.
Now, obviously, the methods discussed so far all have the premise of starting with a fair amount of data, either using available data or being able to talk to large groups of customers. What about the price setting of a product in a B2B context, where obviously that large data sets is just not available? Nicole?
That's a good question. Maybe before we go to B2B, when I show like conjoint as an example, often I get the comment, oh, this is great for FMCG products. Well, it's great for any sector, as long as you can talk to sufficient people, so any industry it will apply to. But of course, in B2B, you don't always have the luxury to talk to 100 people or 200 people. Maybe you can only talk to 30. And then we have to rely on other methodologies. But before we go into that, I would want to stress that also the 4 Cs or relevant also to for B2B. So it's not only in B2B that you only have to look at cost plus, you cover all 4 of them. But Philip, I know that you have a great technique in a B2B environment.
Yeah, so B2B, often you think about qualitative research, right? Because the limited number of observations. Nevertheless, a technique that I often recommend over there is judgmental calibration. That's a little bit trying to quantify, the opinions of people working in your organization, more specifically your salespeople. Typically, your salespeople, they have like a good understanding of your customers, right? And they can try to give you a little bit more information about what is the relationship between price and demand. And how do we tackle that? We organize workshops where we bring together all salespeople. And then we ask them, well, first we give them the information at this price point. Currently this year, for example, we sold that many units for this specific product. And then we ask them, well, if you would increase the price with, for example, 2%, what kind of decrease in sales would you expect? Which customers would you lose? If we would increase it with 5%, 10%, 20%, well, salespeople, please write down how much decrease in sales you would expect. On the other way around, you can also ask, if we would decrease our price, yeah, how much additional sales would you expect? You know, yeah, we just lost like this person or this company due to very marginal, too much high price. So normally we would win this one back, or we would have sold our product over there. Do this again for -5%, -10%, -20%. We do this for multiple salespeople, collect that information, average this out, and then suddenly you will have on all these percentage points, you know, adjustments in demand. See that? And you would be able to generate this price demand curve again. Now, why is this useful? Because normally, if you're going to have discussions with salespeople, they typically will say, let's decrease the price. Let's decrease the price. Yeah, giving recommendations immediately. And I say, let's just quantify the knowledge of the salespeople in a price demand curve, right? And then it's up to us to translate this price demand curve again into a price profit curve and look for the ideal price point. You see that? So that's the reason why I like this technique a lot.
I think it's great to involve sales. I would say you involve sales in a kind of a neutral way without kind of offending them immediately by saying, you know, we're going to increase the price, you know, so you look at it from both sides. But of course, it's more in a B2B environment, more than only talking to the salespeople. We also need to involve or listen to the customer, basically the fourth C or the third C. And Tim, that's where you come in, right? Qualitative research in B2B.
Yes, indeed. Qualitative research. It offers some quite different advantages to a pricing strategy, especially in B2B and also B2B2C context, where data is usually more limited or restricted. But the advantage is that the human, more emotional relationships are as a result deeper. So by using qualitative methods, we can really start to dig deep in terms of the value drivers, the needs, the perceptions, channel motivations, etc. To deep dive those emotions to pricing. And very often people think like, oh, pricing is a topic you can't really talk about in a qual setting. People wouldn't really go into that. But if handled the right way, customers, in our experience, most often find that is not a problem and they open up about it. And we can even do a sort of Gaber-Granger exercise in a qual setting. So it's a great addition to the toolbox as to extracting the why behind the numbers. And as a result, it can be used before a quant study, after a quant study, or both to really flesh out the insights. And of course, we use different methods for that. We use in-depth interviews, focus groups, both face-to-face as online, so they remain crucial. But it's all very much about also using the right projective techniques, using comparative pricing exercises, menu building, role play scenarios. And of course, you need to do that with the right target respondent. You can't do that just with anyone. You need to really know how to do it. But it really helps find why customers justify certain prices and what features would make a higher price acceptable. Perhaps a final aspect when talking about qual B2B is sampling, because obviously sample sizes are much smaller. There's limited data available, but it doesn't mean that it's less effective. The insights, you know, we can do recruitment based off current client databases, lost leads, strategic accounts identified by sales teams. And of course, all with a firm eye on data quality and recruitment quality. But key is that with that reduced sample, 8 to 12 in-depth interviews will get you some very, very decent insights to start off with. For segmented studies, 3 to 5 interviews, plenty sufficient. So it shows you, of course, you can build on with a bigger sample if possible, but that already gives you a very solid level of insights. And of course, there's a lot of upcoming AI tools that are really interesting, predominantly for B2C. Scalable qual solutions remain a bit tricky, I find, at least for now, but we'll see what the future brings, of course.
And that's a very good point, Tim. AI that we haven't covered so far. I think the methodologies that we've discussed in the last half hour that already existed when I started more than 20 years ago, but now there's AI. Philip, what's your view on AI for pricing?
AI, the buzzword of
Yes.
today, right? Well, I'm a professor in business analytics and AI. I'm in this field already for multiple years. And today, honestly, if people start talking about AI, I often say, yeah, but what do you mean with artificial intelligence? Because the perception of AI is so different for many people. A visualization that frequently is used if it comes to artificial intelligence is the following one, where they say artificial intelligence, it can be based on techniques such as machine learning, okay? And actually machine learning is a technique that maps relationships between input variables, such as, for example, price, and output variables, such as demand. You see that? And these machine learning techniques, they're over here already for, more than 20 years. And actually, we use these machine learning techniques. You see that? But that's not the AI that a lot of people have in their minds, right?
Mm-hmm.
They think about ChatGPT today. They think about Copilot, generative AI, we call this, which is based on deep learning, for example. And over there, I need to be honest that, the utilization of these advanced AI techniques, it's fairly limited in the context of pricing, especially in strategic pricing, because typically these techniques are less interpretable. And I'm stressing this price demand curve so much that I want to get out of the model, and then I need to fall back on more traditional machine learning techniques that allows me to map the price demand curve. Generative AI, well, you might use this mostly for data collection, for example. If you want to get secondary data of competitors, well, today, instead of having to crawl the web yourself, you can ask an AI agent, for example, to do that for you and keep an eye on all the prices of your competitors. You see that? The only moment I see some opportunities for AI, that is dynamic pricing. You see, that is pricing not from a strategic point of view, but more operational. For example, constantly adjusting the price depending on the context, like airline carriers are doing that today. Well, over there, you see already some kind of AI being embedded, but that's not relevant for plenty of organizations. It's only like a limited number of organizations that are really fully focusing on highly dynamic prices supported with AI tools.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I mean, the way we use AI is definitely not for the modeling because, it's not yet accurate enough to rely on it for strategic pricing. We use it for many other purposes, AI, but not so much for price modeling. So fully agree to that, Philip. Tim, I think we've covered the topics we wanted to cover today, or anything left?
Yes, no, we've come to the end. I think it's been a great discussion. It's gone fast. Of course, we're not done yet with the Q&A coming up. But before moving to that, would you both want to say something in terms of any thoughts that the audience might want to remember?
Yeah, key takeaways from my part, I would say the 4 C's. I think it's so important to start with those, see where you are on this, what's your company ambition, get a good view of your cost, what are your competitors doing, and of course listen to your customers. If you're not ready for all, I would say gradually move up, but that's really the starting point.
Yeah. Philip?
Yeah, I'm a little bit realistic over here. I would like to say, look, doing analysis on pricing is not the most easy type of data analytics or market research, but it's valuable. For me, price, it's one of the only elements in your organization to do value capturing. We spend a lot of efforts and time in order to do value creation with promotion, branding, product designs, and so on. With the value capturing, you can only do that on price. And it's not so easy to do market research on that. But if you just have even the smallest additional insights on this, it will have a huge impact on your bottom line, on your P&L, you see. So I would recommend and motivate everybody over here listening, do some research on pricing because it can help your organization significantly in value capturing.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'll maybe add to that very briefly. I would say it applies to any type of company, both in B2C or B2B. Of course, different methods apply, whether they're quant or qual, in how you approach and, of course, retrieve key data. Okay, thank you both. And I think we can shift to the Q&A session for the audience. Again, if you have any further questions that you've not put in the chat, feel free to do so, and we'll see you there.
Hi, everyone. First of all, an important one, we're running a little bit late, so and we're going to continue with the questions, of course. No worries if you have to leave early. Every one of you will receive the recording as well. And of course, please make sure to also look at the satisfaction survey. It's really important that we get some feedback in terms of where we can steer the next webinars as well. But let's go to the questions that we got, and perhaps the first one by Warren. Thank you very much. It's I'll sort of reduce it a little bit because the question sort of is: are the 4 C's of pricing still relevant in terms of what they can capture in current day, especially with the rise of AI native scaled businesses? I don't know who would like to take that first, Nicole.
Yeah, I would say, and thank you, Warren, for your question. I would say that the 4 C's, the way you would implement them for different types of businesses will be different, and for some it will be more easy than others. So with all the types of businesses that appear these days, you might think, well, there's a different model needed, but in a way, you always have a strategy, even if it's like a SaaS business. What do you want to achieve? You will have competitors, even if they're not kind of cloud-based or something else. There are other companies around there that offer services. So those are things that you have to take into account, maybe in a slightly different way, but you're never going to act on your own. You have your cost, of course, and you have customers. You always have customers. You also mentioned in your question a very fair point on the multinational companies. We haven't really touched that in terms of pricing, but that's a whole scale. You could almost, it's not exactly competitors, but you could almost put it in that bucket in a sense. How do you have to take into account that you might have different prices across different countries? You know, countries are almost competing with each other. So that's another factor that, of course, you have to take into account. So that adds to the complexity, but I think the core of how you look at it or how you disentangle pricing, to me, feels very similar, but the mechanics might be slightly different. But I see Philippe nodding there. Do you have another view or similar view?
No, I agree. I see Warren referring to, for example, cloud scaled businesses, software as a service businesses. Honestly, also in that context, I have done already pricing research, still relying, for example, on the C of competitor. Let's have a look at which kind of SaaS businesses are doing things that are similar as our businesses. What is the more or less value they deliver, you know? And then based on that, you're going to give already kind of a first price indication. You see that? On top of that, we also try to do more customer-based pricing, leveraging techniques such as Van Westendorp, Gaber and Granger, for example, in order to see like, okay, once we propose the value, how much are they willing to pay per license? How much are they willing to pay per user? I fully agree, however, that this business is more complex in terms of pricing than the traditional physical products, right? Because you have different methods to apply the pricing per license, per product, per usage. You see that? Which makes it, in my opinion, even more interesting. One thing we did over there was even like looking into which kind of features can we bundle, right? In such a way that we develop some kind of a basic package for very price sensitive customers, but then the very important features for my less price sensitive customers we put into another bundle, which is then significantly more expensive than the basic package. You see that? So it's quite interesting in my opinion, but still we still rely on the 4 Ps that we have discussed earlier. In terms of multinational companies, I agree that, at the moment you have plenty of products or plenty of regions, you cannot do that like in every single region and every single product. You try to look for some flagship regions or flagship products, right? Over there you do in-depth research, and then honestly you apply still some business rules in order to extrapolate that to other regions or sometimes other products. You see that? So that is something a technique that I like.
Okay, well, thanks for the comprehensive answer. Warren, feel free to react in the chat if you have another follow-up question. In the meantime, we'll maybe go to the second one that we got by Nicolene. Thank you very much. And that sort of, I'll sort of bring it down to the context of inflation. When inflation distorts the list prices, so they no longer reflect clear value logic, what would the two of you recommend to sort of rebuild the value-price relationship?
Good question, not an easy question, because I would need to understand a little bit further why that logic is not there anymore, especially not the value logic, because that's very often where you start, where you add your prices to where you offer value. But I think it will be important to kind of rebuild it by understanding again, or maybe revisiting what products are offering value and why, and start there again to put your pricing. And of course, build that into your communication, and especially because I think, Nicolene, you're coming from slightly B2B, B2C perspective, you'll have to bring sales in this picture as well, because they're very important in that price list. But it's I wouldn't say start from scratch, but it's really disentangling and see where does value play, which are the most important ones, and use those as your anchor points. But I would need a little bit more information on that. I'm not sure, Philippe, if you have any view on that.
Yeah, well, the only thing, my biggest view is if your value and your price is not really aligned anymore, honestly, it's a little bit of a dangerous situation for your organization. You see that? Either you will have to adjust prices so they match the value again, but you might not do that because you say like, okay, but then I'm eating up my own profit margins, for example. But that seems for me quite dangerous, right? Or customers are seeing the value not anymore. Yeah, that's also quite dangerous, right? So then it's either adjusting your product, or if you say we have a valuable product, then it's adjusting your communication. If you have salespeople only talking about discounts because the price is so high, okay, maybe you need to train your salespeople a little bit more, talking not immediately about discounts, but talking about the value, for example. But again, I agree with Nicole. I need to understand the context a little bit more.
Okay, thank you both for that answer. Got some more questions rolling in, so great. Vincent, thank you for your question. So Vincent's question is: should the price also be tailored to the client's overall client profitability, or does such an approach carry its own risks in terms of price or value perception? Who would like to go first? Philippe,
if you only focus on profitability, and if you're able to measure clients' willingness to pay perfectly, then my answer would be yes. But this is a very unique scenario, right? We're able to measure this perfectly, and we're only focusing on profitability. What are the risks? Well, first of all, it's not easy. You need to have already a lot of good data to measure this for every single client, their willingness to pay, so that's already a challenge. Secondly, will we only focus on profitability? Dynamic pricing, because that's basically what Vincent is suggesting over here, dynamic pricing based on customer-specific characteristics, right? That also comes with a risk, and that risk is ethics. The risk is perceived fairness by your clients. You see that? And we have seen cases already where clients are actually not agreeing with the fact that prices would change depending on the brand of your mobile phone. I'm just saying something, right? See that? And that is the risk you take if you're really going to go to fully personalized pricing.
There's also a risk that you're going to stretch it too far, because I think that's, I think we already mentioned in the webinar, the kind of very expensive brands like Hermes and the Chanel. Some of them are really struggling because I think they stretched it too far almost to really focus on that profitability. But at some point you come to a situation that your customers are not, you know, your perception, I read their value perception, that's not anymore where it used to be. So there's a limit to this, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your question, Vincent. Again, feel free to drop a follow-up question if you need to. We've got another question that came in by Joe. Let me read it out. It's not too long. Too many companies seem to focus on cost-based pricing. And Joe, you find it frustrating as a cost base may be too high and a risk of too many buffers. How do you suggest tackling competitor pricing in a B2B market environment where data clearly isn't as easily available? Who would like to go with this?
I also get that question frequently in my classes. And honestly, Joe, I don't have a solid answer on collecting B2B data. You know, in the B2B sector, I assume it's a sector where prices are not like always publicly available, and definitely not the discounts provided. Yeah, it's just hard. I believe the only thing what you can do is train your salespeople. The people that are closest to this are your salespeople, because they talk with your customers. They might also get, or maybe proactively ask for the prices received from competitors, and then systematically keeping track of that would give us at least a first view. Will that be perfect? By far not, but that's kind of a thing that I typically recommend to do, such a way that we at least get like a slightest light on what competitors are doing. But it's difficult, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, what we sometimes do as well is not so much in a consistent way, because indeed, if you can train sales in a consistent way to track that, that's the perfect way. We sometimes also talk to customers of our customers to get a view on the prices of other providers they might be using, and surprisingly enough, most people do open up on that. They might not say exactly what price they're paying, but they might say it's 5% more expensive, or about 5% cheaper or more expensive. Clients are typically more open with that information than you would think they are, because that's the general impression. No one will tell us this is a secret. It's not a secret. Or they don't see it as a secret. If you do it in the right way, they will open up. But you have to use the right tools, I would say, to do that, questioning tools.
Okay, thanks again. We've got another question from Eric in the context of e-commerce this time. So within that kind of e-commerce context, would the budget for shipment outweigh products with with a lower sales value? And is it better to sort of keep the cost lower and to sort of emphasize on product cost, or the other way around?
I think it'll depend what's valuable, what customers, because I haven't been able to read it fully, so I'm kind of reading and answering at the same time. What's most valuable for the consumer? Is it the product or the shipment? Because these days, convenience of shipment is very important. So I think that's also a value driver of your offering. Because these days, companies cannot differentiate so much anymore on product, so they differentiate on service.
Okay.
So.
Sorry, Nicola. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, if I understand Eric's question a little bit, is in the end you need to take the shipments cost for your organization also into account the moment you start determining the price of your products, right? And remember, in the talk, I talked about the price response curve, right? And we try to transform that into a price profit curve, right? Over there, you need to take the shipment cost into account. If we have larger volumes, your relative shipment cost will decrease. If you only sell small volumes, your relative shipment cost will increase. I hope that makes sense a little bit. You see that? And it's in that transition that actually, Eric, you can simulate that. You can really have a look like, okay, if I set my price higher, yeah, okay, what will be the response? Okay, if I then assume that products are purchased like less together, for example, also because, yeah, they will purchase less products in itself, you can take the shipment cost into account, and you can actually mathematically make even simulations on that. So again, it all starts with the price response curve, and then it's just a matter of taking that shipment cost into account, taking into account that with a lower price, you will typically sell more products. With a higher price, you will typically sell less products with a constant shipping cost. That's a little bit how I see this.
And that's exactly what you would measure in a conjoint. We've actually done that a while ago, I'm just remembering, where you look at the different kind of combinations of high or low shipment cost versus product cost.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Eric. Really good question. Another question rolled in by Nano. Let me just briefly read it out. Regarding B2B customers working with, in this case, ingredient solutions that come at a certain price, but where the real price is expressed in terms of cost of usage in production, different levels of concentration, translated into the price of the produced end product. How would you incorporate this into a simple to understand CVC task model, for example?
Oh, now do we have to answer that in one?
Maybe we can do another webinar.
I need to think about it a little bit. Yeah, and it's a very good question, and I think you probably know why you're asking that. In the sense that is a conjoint possible for complex elements, and it's really then to almost every pricing question can be translated in research, but it's then think about how you do that in an easy way so people filling in the survey can actually do that. To answer that now in the next 5 seconds is a little bit challenging, but it's definitely doable. But I would have to think about it now, and I'm happy to come back. Unless, Philippe, you can immediately answer that one.
Again, it depends on whether you will go for over here a cost plus kind of approach. Honestly, if it would be cost plus, my answer is you need to talk to the people from accounting and operations that try to allocate the cost factors to the specific final product, and that's definitely an exercise to be done. From a value-based point of view, honestly, I don't know how well customers are able to assess the value of the final product. If so, then you can do the exercise, you know. But it seems to be quite of a specific niche.
We also very often do some pilot testing, or we test it out with a few people to see if it's, you know, do they understand it? Do they interpret it in the right way? So the more complex it is, the more kind of testing we do. So it would definitely require some testing now. But I would have to think a little bit how we would translate it.
Indeed, if I refer to the research we did for the SaaS company, that's also sometimes also already a complex product. Honestly, in the surveys, we even like start a survey with a video that tries to explain the value proposition of that product before the questionnaire even starts. It's important that customers understand the final product, because otherwise it's not valuable to do research on this.
Okay, well, great. Yeah, we've come to the hour. We've already been over a little bit, so I want to thank you all for joining the webinar. We hope you've enjoyed it, and again, please take the time to run through our satisfaction survey. It's something we really use and appreciate to steer our future webinars into the direction that is most valuable to you, our audience. So on that note, I want to thank both my panel members today, Nicole and Philippe. I think it's been very insightful, and I think it was a very good discussion and some very good questions, I think challenging questions as well. So thank you very much for your time, and of course you, the audience, for attending as well.